Welcome to the opening convocation of the 1965 Religious Emphasis Week. This year we are focusing on intellectual problems related to faith. We wanted to avoid a general religious approach, so we have invited each group represented on Religious Council to provide an outside speaker or resource person. The team approach is being utilized as a means of reaching more of the campus during the week. Conference leaders seated on stage will participate on panels and lead group discussions in residence halls, in addition to classroom visitations and luncheon groups. Please refer to the daily bulletin distributed at the convocations for the schedule. To introduce our layman keynote speaker for this evening is Dr. John E. Visser, Executive Assistant to the President of Ball State University. Dr. Visser.
Thank you, Chuck. Platform guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow students. It is always a rare treat for us at Ball State University to have a member of the United States Senate on our campus to speak to us about matters of state. And this is the second visit we've had in recent weeks. We had, many of you recall, that Senator Bai was here just a few weeks ago. Tonight, however, we shall hear an address on a different topic from a senator who is here not in his capacity as a member of the United States Senate, but as an outstanding Christian layman in the Lutheran Church of the Missouri Synod. Senator Vance Hartke is a member of the St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Evansville, Indiana, and when he's in Washington, he attends the St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Falls Church, Virginia. Senator Hartke has long been active in the Lutheran Church and is an outstanding layman in the Lutheran Church, but currently is not holding a church office. Most of us Hoosiers, native and adopted, know Senator Hartke and are familiar with his outstanding record of public service. He is a native of Pike County, Indiana. He's a graduate of Evansville College and received his law degree from Indiana University. Senator Hartke held public office as Deputy Prosecutor of Vanderburgh County and Mayor of Evansville before being elected to the Senate for the first time in 1958 by a record majority. I believe he even exceeded his first majority when he was reelected this past fall to a second term. Is that right, Senator? Good. There is much I could say about Senator Hartke's record in the United States Senate, but suffice it to say at this point, his record was excellent and his accomplishments were substantial, or we highly selective and extremely critical Indiana voters would not have re-elected him as we did. It is my privilege at this time to introduce the Honorable Vance Hartke, Indiana Senior Senator, who will speak on the topic, the substance of things hoped for. Senator Hartke.
Distinguished members here on the platform and my distinguished friends in the audience. I'm delighted that I'm here at Ball State University. I said this afternoon that I graduated from Evansville College, and since we had a basketball team there this year that did very well, I'm looking forward to you people following suit with an undefeated season next year. I'm sure you can do that. I'm delighted to be a part of this great Religious Emphasis Week. About this time of the year in Indiana, this matter of basketball seems to go through almost everyone's heart. We have what's called the Basketball Emphasis Week. Sometimes it's maybe a month. But anyway, we're talking about the annual basketball tournaments. Last fall, and I frankly have some very sharp personal recollections of this incident and this affair, we had a political emphasis week. And when it comes to examination time, I expect that most of you students find that you have a study emphasis week, or perhaps you call it a stay up all night or a cram week. Well, this is good. To be well-rounded, we must turn our attention first to one area and then to another. Basketball, to a lot of us, is important. Studying is important, I think, to you, certainly to me, when I was in school, or otherwise you wouldn't be at Ball State at all. Politics is important. I believe that, or I would never have become a candidate for public office. But here and now, this week, I am here and you are here at this meeting because we all believe that religion is important. That is why we pause to take a look at this week and call it Religious Emphasis Week. And because we believe that religion is important, you have a student religious council. And because we feel the needs of religion, you have various religious groups on this campus. There's a Methodist, a Baptist, Catholic, Jewish, and so on, each of you with your own religious advisors. And what I've called Basketball Emphasis Week, and you have a devotion to sports. There's a recognition in such a case that a complete person must cultivate the body. Likewise, during the study week, the basic function of education here in this university, you recognize the importance of the mind and its need for equally rigorous training. Now, Religious Emphasis Week brings to the public notice and to your student body the third part of this traditional triad of body, mind, and spirit. And it's good that we should do so. Now, frankly, I believe in all three of these activities. I've always been interested in sports, and I was even captain of the basketball team 30 pounds ago at Evansville College myself. I've been interested in scholarships and education, both as a student and since then as a senator. That's why I'm working so hard for legislation which will make it possible for every boy or girl to go to college without regard to his economic status, or in other words, whether he has the money or not. I'm also interested as a church member in this third area, the realm of the Spirit, or of religious faith. And of course, we all know that without religious faith, the body and the mind are incomplete. So I welcome the invitation to be with you, and I welcome the chance to participate in these sessions. I'm glad to share this evening. I think we're going to have another speaker, is that right? From the other side? We're going to have a minister to talk to you too. I'm also glad to see that we have here as the treasurer of your religious council, Mr. Charles Twa and Harold Melser, who are also Lutherans, and I might say maybe that had something to do with the fact the Lutheran got here from Washington, D.C. But whether we're Lutherans or Unitarians or Catholics or whatever we are, we all have a challenge in the theme that is before us this week. That is faith. Is it sound and fury, signifying nothing? And what is faith anyway? Well, I'm not going to try to give you a sermon dealing in theological definitions, because we have others here who are well versed in that, and I'm sure they can do an excellent job of telling you what the word faith really means in those terms. But the word faith is a common word. And whether it is a true reality or not, which I think it is, but which I think we can demonstrate in a moment, we all use it. We use the word faith almost daily. But if I ask you suddenly and very quickly to say, give me your definition of faith, you might find it none too easy. I frankly have a big Webster's International Dictionary in my office, and under faith it lists 10 different definitions of this word. One of them, it may apply to someone here tonight, to one of these charming young ladies that's out here. If you use the word faith with a capital F, it signifies the name of a girl. But the number one proposition in the definition of faith is this: the act or state of acknowledging unquestionably the existence, the power, or the like of a supreme being and the reality of a divine order, belief in God, revelation, or the like. Then as an illustration, there stands a quotation from the 11th chapter of the letter to the Hebrews, a verse which probably is a classic of all definitions of faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The Revised Standard Version gives a slightly different wording. It says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. There are a good many things that we believe in, frankly, that are never seen. I suspect that maybe some of you here may be in love. I'm not sure that probably there are more of you who may think you're in love. That's all right, and that's fine. College is a fine place to learn to love, and I frankly found my wife on the college campus at Indiana University. And I know that you, if you seek that type of relationship, you want one that will last, and I hope it will last a lifetime. But did you ever see love? You can see and feel its effects, but you can't see love itself. You have a conviction. You have a conviction about things you don't really see when you really see and feel that you're in love. So if you believe you have the love of another, it pretty much turns out to be the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. After all, that's not so far from faith itself, then, is it? Because certainly you can't have much love unless faith is there in the midst. Faith in your loved one, faith in your own love, faith that the two of you can conquer all the obstacles of life. Assurance in your deepest conviction that together that you can reach the things hoped for. Now, I've been using the word faith, and perhaps you've caught it by now, in another and more secular meaning. For while acknowledgement of a supreme being or a belief in God is the first definition of faith, that is the religious definition, we do have faith in other things. Among those other things, and I want to point this out to you, is people, if that's not a contradiction, because people are persons, and frankly, they're not things. But let's say, for the moment, among those other things that we want to discuss, it is when we begin, however, to treat people as things instead of persons that we get into serious trouble. One can own a thing, but a person can never be owned. One can never own a person. That's why slavery was so cruel. We talk about the unemployment rate of 5%. That is a statistic. That is a thing. But we must never forget that the reality has a real bigger meaning, a bigger dimension, that of persons. It's not 5% unemployment. It is one person out of every 20 who wants a job and can't find one. So forgetting for the moment about faith in its religious sense, there is this thing of faith in a derivative sense, faith in persons. The illustrations of it are all about us every day. In Washington, some of the evening television news broadcasts are sponsored by a bus company, and it's a nationwide system, and you may see the same ads there. You said, take the bus and leave the driving to us. What they're saying is all right, because they're saying really you can have faith in the competence of our drivers. Whenever I fly, as I did this weekend, for example, just returning from Bermuda, and the weather's warmer here than it was there, back as I did yesterday to New York and back into Washington and here to the state of Indiana, if I didn't have faith in that pilot, I would be filled with such fear for my own safety that I would never dare to get off the ground or walk into that plane and see him close the hatch behind me. Back in my own office, if I didn't have faith in the competence of my staff, the fear of the errors that they might make, which could cripple me as my political life or governmental life, why, this fear of, or this distrust, this unfaith, the fact would force me to supervise such details and so minute effect that I would absolutely not be able to do anything. When Gus Grissom, as he's going to in the future and as he did in the past, took off in his capsule for the wild blue yonder, rocketing into orbit, he had to have enormous faith in human persons, in scores and hundreds and thousands whom he might never see. But he had the assurance beyond hope and a conviction that although he had never seen them, that they had been faithful in their task, so faithful that his life could safely depend on them. Perhaps in a way, some of these illustrations from the realm of human faith can give illumination to what we conceive as religious faith. Certainly the faith that we have in other persons, whether in that person who is nearest and dearest or in those of whom we depend but never see, is a parallel to what we think of as our faith in God. Perhaps we are tempted when we speak in the abstract and in the theoretical sense and terms, in this business of wordy theological speculation, to dismiss the whole exercise as a semantic bout with words as sound and fury signifying nothing. But there is, in the practicing concrete faith that we exhibit in other persons, there is a solid substance of reality. Now, I want you to note that I said the concrete faith, practicing concrete faith. Here we return again to something that I spoke of earlier. that while we can no more see faith than we can see love, yet we can see the results of each in their practice. It is this results of the practice of faith which can change an individual. It can change a whole situation. In fact, can change a whole world. Faith in the ideal of peace as an achievable goal, many of us believe, can do much more in bringing about that goal than the use of physical and strategic and material force. For faith is a force, though only when it results in action which is based on faith. Jesus, in effect, said this: what good is it if you gain the whole world and lose your own soul? In like fashion, what good is it to have faith unless you have a practical expression of it? The old proverb goes that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. In a similar fashion, the proof of your faith is in your performance. Now, Edgar Guest, the people's poet he's called, and he's not highly regarded by the professors here of literature, but he had a way of expressing thoughts in simple, readable terms. One of his poems was entitled Sermons We See. And he said, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather that one would walk with me than merely show the way. The eye is a better pupil and more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but example is always clear. And the best of all the preachers are the men who live their creeds. For to see good in action is what everybody needs. I can soon learn how to do it if you'll let me see it done. I can watch your hand in action, but your tongue too fast may run. And the lectures you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lesson by observing what you do. For I may misunderstand you and the high advice that you give, but there is no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. Perhaps you might say to me that I'm not talking like a senator or like a politician in these terms, but if you think that, you are dead wrong. Faith is the most vital ingredient in this conduct of public affairs in democracy. I frankly am sustained by my faith in people who elect me, by the belief that the pursuit of the course which is right, even in the face of severe opposition, is absolutely essential, both as far as moral conduct is concerned and frankly as far as political wisdom is concerned. For if this much is true, it is the idealists of the world who coldly base their own idealism on reality and sound judgment on the possible. They are the ones then who leave their true political mark in history. The other day, on the 4th of March, I sat with other members of the Special Joint Committee of the Congress, under whom this program was arranged in Washington. We sat on a small platform built on the steps on the east front of the Capitol, a duplicate, as nearly as possible, of that which had stood there 100 years before to the day. And as we of 1965 listened to Adlai Stevenson, a modern idealist who will leave behind him, out of his faith and democracy, a heritage for the world as well as for this nation, this narrator, Adlai Stevenson, described the scene of March the 4th, 1965. Down the steps from the rotunda, just as he had done 100 years ago, came Abraham Lincoln in cutaway coat, stovepipe hat, beard and all. And in the reenactment of the scene, Lincoln, who was played by the actor Robert Ryan, received the oath of office from the Chief Justice Chase, surrounded by the other members of his party, including Mary Todd Lincoln, the Supreme Court justices, the cabinet members, and the soldiers in their Union blue. The crowd which was there, to a crowd perhaps larger than that even of the original occasion, we heard again from Ryan, as Lincoln, the magnificent second inaugural address. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which we may achieve and cherish for a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. There, in that dark hour, spoke the faith of a man in other men, but it was also the faith of a man in God. the God whom he trusted to give a vision of the right, the God from whom faith brought the concept of malice toward none, in the midst of a conflict which was dividing brother against brother, the God whom Lincoln trusted as the source of his concern for the widows and the children. Lincoln was, though not especially a partisan enthusiast for any special religious sect, nevertheless, like Washington and like all great American leaders or other leaders throughout the history, a man of great faith. His speech was not only words, for few there would say that this was merely sound and fury, signifying nothing. They were rather a deep and a moving expression of faith. If he could have foreseen the tragic events of that night only 6 weeks later in Ford's Theater, he would, I am sure, have been no less filled with faith. The assurance of his second inaugural was a faith in things hoped for, a conviction of things not yet seen. You are discussing in this Religious Emphasis Week the meaning of faith. I suppose you will be trying to find whether there is in this modern day of skepticism a reality behind the sound and fury of religious terms. I believe there is such a reality. I was brought up in such a belief. Now I'm trying the best I know how to bring my children up likewise in that belief. Perhaps for all of us, however, faith must often be a little less than complete. For we all have that God-given ability to question, to ponder, and to reason. And we have the God-given freedom to doubt, as we have the freedom to choose from right against wrong. But we also have the God-given opportunity to seek courage from prayer, to step forward in the greatest faith of which we are capable toward those things which are unseen, but no less real. Last year I received a letter from a high school student who was making a special and somewhat unusual collection. He wanted to know what was my favorite verse of Scripture. I had no hesitation in giving him that verse. It's the one which reflects, although I did not have that fact in mind at the time, the faith to which I hold. It's not especially or distinctly a Lutheran faith, but it's a Christian faith. For the faith of a Christian necessarily must not stand in the Lord alone, but a faith in the Christ who is essential to Christian and to Christian belief. There are a great many verses of the Scripture, but this is the one which I gave to him. In my Father's house are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would have told you so. For faith, frankly, is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Thank you, Senator Harkey. To introduce our conference leaders and our keynote speaker is Mr. George W. Jones, the Director of Religious Programs. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chuck. It's a joy to welcome to the campus some 15 or 16 conference leaders who will be participating during the next 3 days in a number of ways on our campus. 8 of them are on the platform tonight. I would like to present them to you at this time, and if you wish to clap, wait until I have introduced the last one. The person to my extreme left over here, your right, is Dr. Roy Blackwood, who is pastor of the Reformed Presbyterian Church in Indianapolis. In addition to the Bachelor of Divinity degree, which is a basic theological degree, he holds a doctorate in history from New College, University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He is here under the auspices of the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. Dr. Blackwood. Seated next to him is Dr. Clarence Ephraimson, Professor of Economics at Butler University in Indianapolis. Dr. Ephraimson, in addition to degrees in economics from Harvard and the University of Vienna, holds the Bachelor of Hebrew Literature degree from Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. He has been a member of the board of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. We welcome him here and join in the invitation which the Jewish Student Fellowship gave him. Dr. Ephraimson. Thank you. Reverend Clyde Flannery, at present, is one of the ministers serving the Indiana-Kentucky Conference of the United Church of Christ with offices in Indianapolis. Before this time, he was a pastor in the South, was very active in social action and civil rights movements there. A native of Kentucky, he is a graduate of Berea College and the Yale University Divinity School. For a period of some 5 years, he was president of the Southern Union College in Wadley, Alabama. He is a guest of the United Student Fellowship this week. Reverend Flannery. Mr. Thomas Keller, after a very successful career as a real estate appraiser, is now engaged as a full-time Christian Science practitioner. As a real estate appraiser, he was a member of the National Board of Governors of the National Association of Real Estate Managers. His home is in Indianapolis. His particular responsibility is working with Christian Science students in Indiana. Mr. Keller. The Reverend John Miner is the Episcopal chaplain at Purdue University. He is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate from Lehigh University and received his seminary training at the General Theological Seminary in New York City. He held pastorates in New York before coming to Indiana. It's a joy to welcome, along with the Canterbury Club, the Episcopal student group, the Reverend John Miner to our campus. John? Also coming to us from West Lafayette is the disciples or Christian minister to students from there, the Reverend David Reese. Before his ministry at Purdue, he was pastor of Christian churches, Disciples of Christ churches, in Oklahoma for some 10 years. His degrees are from Phillips University, the Christian Church University in Oklahoma. Reverend Reese. Mr. Fred Reeve, at present, is the building program consultant for Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. He has had several professional careers in his life. One of the most notable, I think, was the development of the Flanner House self-housing development in Indianapolis. Before this time, he was the African Field Secretary for the Friends African Mission, and served while in this position. He was the Director of Church World Service in Kenya, East Africa, and was Chairman of the Department of Relief and Rehabilitation for the Christian Council of Kenya. Mr. Fred Reed. The Reverend Kenneth Spellman. I might say that Mr. Reeve is the guest of the Fellowship of Friends this week on our campus. The Reverend Kenneth Spellman is the guest of the Evangelical United Student Fellowship and the Westminster Student Fellowship. At Indiana University, as an ordained Evangelical United Brethren minister, he works on the staff of the University Presbyterian Chapel. This is a joint or ecumenical project at the University of Indiana, commonly known as the United Campus Christian Fellowship. He is a member of the Bloomington Fair Housing Committee, and I was holding my breath this week to be sure he was going to make it. He said he was on call at any time to go to Selma, Alabama, but I see that at least he hasn't been needed there yet, so we're very happy to have him with us here tonight. Reverend Spillman. Other conference leaders will be coming in this evening and also tomorrow. At least one of them is in Selma, Alabama, and will be flying up during the day tomorrow. I see that our main keynote speaker, Dr. Akbar Haq, has not arrived as yet. I welcome you back in the morning at 9:10 to this auditorium, at which time we will hopefully, in faith, hear Dr. Haq. You're dismissed.